Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so Jimmy Haslam spoke to the media today, and we don't often get media appearances from Jimmy and D. Haslam. We get them about once or twice a year, maybe. Sometimes you get a special third one, but they don't speak to the media often, so when they do speak, it is something that you should take note of. They addressed a lot of stuff, the Quincy Judkins situation, what really happened with the Shedeur pick, what the future is for Deshaun Watson on this team, what the future outlook is for this team and their mindset going forward as far as job security is considered for Andrew Berry. And they talked about that new stadium a ton. So we're going to talk about this press conference, break down some stuff with some clips. We're going to get started. This is them addressing the Quincy Judkins situation.
Do you care about the health and safety of women? You know, since you've had three guys since last year with domestic violence incidents.
Yeah, great question. Let me say it's extremely frustrating. Okay, obviously we're not communicating as well as we should, and we take responsibility for that. We talk we have internal resources, we have external resources. We talk about it continually, and it's something that we need to do a better job on. But it is frustrating.
Yeah, it's a big focus for us in the organization. So thanks for asking.
The repeated incidents, 3 different players in a year, is that reflective of your team's vetting process?
You know, that's a question I ask. Okay, let's go back and let's look at Keyshawn, let's look at Devin, let's look at Michael Hall, and there was, the best of my knowledge, and we talked about this yesterday with Andrew, there was nothing in any of their backgrounds that showed anything like this.
All right, so nothing in any of their backgrounds to suggest anything like this. I know people have suggested that there were some things with Mike Hall, and I think people need to really be careful, right? Because whenever I hear somebody say there was stuff to tell you that Mike Hall would be in a situation like this, or that Devin Bush would be in a situation like this, it's usually reaches, right? Like people are inferring because they had some kind of issue with the coach or issue with another player on the team, that automatically means that you should just have your alerts up for that guy potentially being involved in a domestic violence dispute. One, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope to go down, right? I don't want to assume just because somebody had an issue in the workplace, that means that they're beating up their significant other behind the scenes. I think that's a wild leap to make, right? Especially in terms of Quincy, where the most I've heard is he got into arguments with his teammates at Ole Miss. So therefore, you should have known that Quincy Judkins would pop up with the domestic violence thing. That's a dangerous leap to take. It's like Minority Report levels of like dangerous. And I know it feels like we live in a parody these days, but that's not a acceptable jump to make in society. So when they say there was nothing to suggest this, right? Maybe I have some questions about how deep they search for some of this, right? Because it does not seem like this Quincy Judkins situation with his girlfriend is a new dynamic in their relationship. Maybe it reached a new level over the summer, but it doesn't seem like it was a new dynamic. The Mike Hall thing is so strange that I'm just going to take whatever word is official on that one, because that one is just a strange situation. I don't know much about the Devin Bush situation either. But there are questions to ask of like, hey, was there information out there? Was there a police report? Was there, a formal complaint of student misconduct in this manner to Ole Miss? Like, was there anything that you could reasonably look up, find out, and point to that's a direct connection to domestic violence, right? whether it be threatening women, threatening abuse to women, or actually enacting that abuse to women, right? But you can't make loose connections like he got mad on the sidelines during the football game and then jump to, oh my God, that means you should have definitely have known. Because if you rule out every draft pick, every player who's ever gotten an argument with the coach or ever had an issue with the coach on the sideline, you're never going to draft anybody because that happens all the time. Another thing to think about is, would you want that conclusion to be jumped to on you? For those of you who are comfortable making that assumption, right, that he had an interpersonal problem at work, therefore it is fair to assume that that guy beats women. Would you like people to make that loose of an assumption on you? That's like a basic golden rule, right? Whenever it comes to this. And it's something that people ought to take more seriously. And this is a side of it where I don't feel like people take it seriously, where they're making these leaps to say, oh, you should have known. Even if they're on the side of the victim, I don't think you're taking it serious when you're just like making these loose conclusions. Would you like somebody to say, well, you got in an argument with your boss, so now I believe that, you were beating women that whole time, and I think you should have never gotten a job because it was obvious that you were doing so because you got in an argument with the boss. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And that's what the Browns need to evaluate. Was there anything real to really determine in that direction that this guy has an issue with questionable behavior towards women, right? Was there a reputation of this that people were aware of at Ohio State with Mike Hall or Quincy Junkins at Ole Miss and Ohio State, right? Or Devin Bush when you brought him in? Was there a reputation of some kind of strangeness with the opposite sex there? That's really the question that has to be answered. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question, right? I don't think any of these sleuths on Twitter are going down to Ole Miss's campus and trying to figure out the truth of this, right? It's just a bunch of people sitting in the chairs talking like they know shit when nobody knows shit. So that's kind of where I sit with it, right? As far as like, could they have known? I do want to know more about what was out there with Quincy Junkins because it seems like there's a possibility that there could have been more out there. And the same is true with Mike Hall. But unless something pops up, maybe there was a formal complaint made at the time that they were in college about this. If something like that pops up and the Browns ignored it, then yeah, I think they deserve all the blame in the world for bringing these guys in and acting surprised that they had these issues pop up. But if nothing like that existed, then I understand the surprise, right? And that's something that can ultimately happen to any team in the NFL. But let's continue.
Have these incidents maybe changed your approach or maybe prompted more resources that you guys are looking into?
Well, I think whenever you're not successful, you got to take a step back and say, what can we do better? Okay, if you'd asked me a month ago, I would say, no, we're all over it. We talk about it continually. We've had outside speakers, inside speakers. We talk about it a lot, but clearly we need to look to see what else we can do. It's not acceptable.
Do you expect Quincy Junkins to eventually sign and play for you?
I do, but that's, we all understand due process of law, and the law does not move quickly. But yes, we're cautiously optimistic.
All right, so it sounds like with Quincy, they're waiting for the charges to be dropped on him, right? To see if he's going to plea out of this whole thing, to see if he's going to fight this thing in court. If he's going to fight this in court, the Browns are probably not going to sign him until that whole ordeal is over. If he pleads out, then I would expect him to sign his contract pretty soon after he pleads out. And I'm more than likely, this is probably going to end in a plea, right? Some kind of semblance of, sensitivity training or something along those lines, and light parole for Quincy Junkins, more than likely, here with a restraining order probably for good mix. So we'll see. The legal process has to play itself out. They're probably going to offer him some sort of plea. That's what happens in most of these cases. He has been formally charged. Those charges don't seem like they're getting dropped anytime soon. And they're waiting and seeing just how far Quincy, his legal team's going to take this in, the direction of court. We'll see what happens there. But I think until that situation's cleared up, they've made it very clear they're probably not going to have him out here at practice. And I think that makes sense for everybody involved, but it is really derailing the career of Quincy Judkins the further this goes along, which is why I think they're going to plea out, right? Like, he does not want to potentially lose his entire rookie year to this situation. And it would not be wise for him to do so. So unless this becomes something so heinous that you have to take it to court, it's probably going to be plead out more than likely. So let's continue. This is now the Haslam'S talking about Shedeur, right? There's a lot of speculation that Shedeur is only here because of Jimmy Haslam. Now, I'm going to break down why I think that conspiracy theory in itself is a bit unsound in a second, but let's hear what Jimmy has to say about that.
We haven't talked to you since the draft. So can you explain why the Browns felt the need to draft Shedeur after drafting a quarterback for the Browns and adding 2 guys?
Well, I think that's really more of an Andrew question, okay? But I think, what was that pick, 146? We thought he was good value at 146.
Jimmy, there's been kind of like a national narrative that you were the person who forced the Shedeur pick, or maybe he was, people have called it the corner pick. Well, what would you say to that?
Yeah, listen, we have good process, okay? And if you'd have told me, let's see, we picked him on Saturday, right? Friday night driving home, y'all are going to pick Shedeur, I would say that's not happening. But we had a conversation early that morning, and then we had a conversation later that day. I think we had the right people involved in the conversation. At the end of the day, that's Andrew Berry's call. Andrew made the call to pick Shedeur. Just like who's going to start or what play we're going to call is Kevin's call. But that's Andrew's call. He made the call.
All right, so that's Andrew's call. He made the call to draft Shedeur Sanders. This has been an interesting conspiracy theory to follow, right? Because it's shocking to me how much of this really people only use to support whatever argument, right? I don't think anybody's actually interested in the truth of this. People are just interested in whichever version of this story makes it more convenient for whatever narrative they're trying to push with Shedeur, which is the annoying thing about covering Shedeur. So many people are so invested in pushing a narrative, whether it be positive or negative, that it makes getting to the truth a combative experience, no matter what side of it is more truthful than not, right? So it's annoying to cover. I will not deny that. But if we're talking about this Shedeur thing, why I think the conspiracy theory of specifically Jimmy Haslam forced the Browns to take Shedeur Sanders is stupid is because, one, it's based off of that one clip from the NFL Network where it didn't look like anybody was excited when they turned the card in for Shedeur Sanders. Okay, it's a 5th-round pick, right? They're not like, oh my God, we didn't think our guy would be there at 5 and our guy's there, right? And they're doing backflips. This is a 5th-round pick. There's no 5th-round pick in which they're going to be jumping for joy for. That's just what happens in the draft. I don't think anybody's board or room would have been like, oh, let's do backflips. We turned in the card for a 5th-round pick. Regardless of what you think about that 5th-round pick, it's a 5th-round pick. So one, the basis of this was always flawed. The logic surrounding this was even dumber, which is Jimmy Haslam is so impatient that he forced Andrew Berry to draft Shedeur, but also at the same time, he's so patient, he waited 143 picks to put his foot down. Does that make sense to you? Like, if Jimmy Haslam wanted to force Shedeur on the team, Shedeur would have been taken with one of those 2nd-round picks. No doubt in my mind, right? That would have been more eyebrow raising of like, hey, Jimmy might have had something to do with this. But the idea that Jimmy just sat back, even though he wanted Shedeur on the team so bad, he not only let the Browns trade away the 2nd pick of the draft, take Mason Graham at 5, take Quincy Judkins, take Carson Schlesinger, and take Harold Faden, and then take Dylan Gabriel, and then take Dylan Sampson, and then finally he said, oh man, I need you guys to get me Shedeur. That makes no sense to me. You could try to make it make sense. It does not make sense. That is not how impatience works. If Jimmy felt that strongly about Shedeur, Shedeur would have been on the team and he would have never slid to day 3 of the draft. If any owner felt that strongly about Shedeur, by the way, he wouldn't have fell to the 3rd day of the draft. He would have been selected and at least day 2 if an owner felt that strongly about him. The truth is, nobody did. That's why he fell in the draft. Also, the opposite is true. If Jimmy Haslam was so disgusted by Shedeur Sanders' pre-draft process that he didn't want him on the team, he definitely wouldn't have allowed the Browns to use a 5th-round pick. I think Jimmy Haslam, contrary to what a lot of people's belief, is fairly neutral on Shedeur. Like, I don't think he is the driving horse behind why he's here. I don't think he's the reason the Browns didn't take him earlier. I think he's pretty neutral on the guy. He's like, hey, they said this was a good decision to make. They understand he's going to bring some attention. Whatever it is, we feel like we could deal with it. Shadeur's on the team. And that's kind of how I think the Browns view him as well, right? Kind of as a value proposition more so than anything, right? Like a value flyer to take a chance on. I think a lot of like the theories on how the Browns got a guy on their roster with a 5th-round pick are just well overblown to the point of nonsense, because again, it doesn't take a lot of explanation to understand why a dude was taken by a team in the 5th round usually. There's evidence too about the long-standing evidence, by the way, that the Browns' philosophy on why they went after Shedeur was obvious, right? There's a clip from the Overtime Elite special of the Shedeur drop behind the scenes that has Shedeur on the phone with the Cleveland Browns representative. And the Cleveland Browns representative says to him, they are waiting to take one more player off their board, but once they get that guy, Dylan Sampson, they're gonna go and get you.
Hey, you heard what they said, Boogie? She said Cleveland. She said this the last player on Cleveland board that they finna get. Then they're gonna try to trade him back into the 5th. No, back into the 4th.
And that's exactly what happened. The Browns cleared their board. And I think that's the more illuminating part of this, is like how the Browns think about it, where it's obvious to me that this is a team that drafts less about best player available and more about the players that they feel like they need to add in this draft class based on their fit to this team, right? They have identified a number of players. Dylan Sampson, they thought they had a great chance to get him in the 4th round. And they said, hey, once we get Dylan Sampson, then we'll try to get whoever's the best available on the board after that, which ended up being Shedeur Sanders, because they thought the value was too strong to pass up. They didn't think that when they took Dylan Gabriel, but once they got Dylan Sampson, the last player on their, hey, he's a great fit, must-get guy, if we can get an opportunity to take him in the first 4 rounds, then they went after Shedeur. I think Andrew Berry wants Shedeur here. I think Kevin Stefanski wants Shedeur here. I think the disconnect is that Shedeur fans are looking at Shedeur Sanders like he's still a 1st-round pick. The Cleveland Browns are looking at Shedeur Sanders like he's a day 3 pick that they feel like they got some solid value on. Those are 2 different ways of looking at it, right? When you're looking at somebody like Shedeur and you're treating them like a 1st-round pick, you're going to want them to get first-team reps at this portion of camp. That's why Shedeur fans are mad about that. But that's not the reality. The way the Browns are looking at this is, hey, we got pretty good value in the 5th round, getting Shedeur Sanders. And, we're going to see how far that goes, which is why they're not super eager to put him in first-team reps, because they're not really considering him for the starting job for obvious reasons. Because they took another quarterback in front of him. They clearly don't see him being somebody who they anticipate is being ready day 1. They see him as being a little bit more of a project. You can like that. You can not. You can agree with that. You can not. I'm just telling you, based on the facts, that's how the Browns view the situation. This isn't some grand conspiracy. The fact that the Browns aren't giving the guy they drafted after Dylan Gabriel more reps with the first team than Dylan Gabriel, that just makes sense. It only doesn't make sense if you're ignoring where Shedeur got drafted and where Dylan got drafted from this same team and acting as if Shedeur is a first-round pick. That's the only time it doesn't make sense. Jimmy has cleared this up. There is multiple pieces of video out there where you can clear this whole thing up. It's not a conspiracy. The Browns want Shedeur here. It wasn't a Jimmy decision. It was a Browns football team decision. And that decision means that Shadeur's probably going to be here and not get cut. But it also means that the Browns aren't going to be in the biggest rush in the world to play him right away, and that they have other things on their priority at the quarterback position. I don't feel like this is hard to grasp, but obviously it's been hard to grasp for some folks. And I think there is a disconnection from reality in the extreme arguments of either the Shedeur Sanders camp, right? Like the pro-Shedeur, the anti-Shedeur. There is a disconnection from reality, right? The people who tell me Shedeur Sanders wasn't even worth a fifth-round pick, that's absurd, okay? That's ludicrous. The guy was clearly worth a fifth-round pick. And the people who tell me that he should have been number 2 pick in the draft, that's absurd. The guy went in 5th round eventually. Like, obviously, nobody thought he was a top 5 pick. That's obvious. It's undeniable. It's proven. You know, you're not crazy for having that opinion. There is a truth here, but if you're on the extreme side of either of this, right, and the glaze for Shedeur and the anti-glaze for Shedeur, it's some of the highest levels I've ever seen for a guy who hasn't played an NFL game yet. Like, at least when people were doing this with Baker Mayfield, he had played NFL football by that point. We're doing all of this at a higher level than it ever got for Baker Mayfield, and the guy hasn't even played in the actual game yet. Let's get to the next one where he addresses the Deshaun Watson situation.
Time we talked to you at the owners' meetings, you delivered the quote, heard around the NFL that Deshaun was a big swing and a miss. And, he's here, he's on PUP. And, do you see a world in which he ever can play football for you guys again?
I think it's premature. I don't think anything's changed on the Deshaun situation since we were together in March. I will say this, he's working hard on his rehab, and that's our focus, is to get him well and healthy, and then we'll make decisions after that.
All right, so same shit he said at the owners' meeting, still regards it as a swing and a miss, did not feel the need to clarify or backpedal that, which I thought was significant, right? Had a clear opportunity to move back off that. That's what Mary Kay was doing when she was asking that question. She's a skilled media person. She's throwing that pitch with intent, right? Like, that's the thing you got to start reading with media folks is a lot of these guys, veterans, been in the game a long time. They're asking these questions knowing it's going to give these guys opportunities to go one way or the other regarding statements that they've had in the past. Mary's asking that question to give Jimmy the opportunity to backtrack that. He did not, right? He said, nothing's changed. We'll see what happens with this rehab. But they're very clearly moving forward from the idea of Deshaun Watson being a starting quarterback for them, or maybe not a starting quarterback, right? Maybe there's a world where Deshaun could start a game or two for the Cleveland Browns in the future by pure circumstance. But the idea of this being Deshaun Watson's franchise, building this thing around Deshaun Watson, treating him as the franchise quarterback, that is dead and gone. It's been dead and gone for quite a while. I would argue it's been dead and gone since the Commanders game. And that's just the truth of it, right? Anybody who is still living in the DW4 is still the franchise quarterback world is living in deep delusion at that point, right? He's done as the franchise quarterback here. Could he start a game by pure circumstance? Sure. But will he be regarded as the future of this franchise going forward? It's clear he's not. And it's clear because listen to how the Browns are talking about their future outlook, right? They spent a lot of time, Jimmy Haslam specifically, talking about the future outlook of the team. And this is not how you talk about a team if you think you have a franchise quarterback.
But really good people. And I'll say this for the 2 quarterbacks coming in, and I know everybody has a vision of Shedeur, but he's come in the building and worked hard, kept his head down, and done what he's supposed to do, as has Dylan, which is no surprise for either of them.
Jimmy, how do you feel about how this organization has wrapped around the developmental part, getting guys ready, the depth piece?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's the challenge in sports, because if your head coach you're charged with winning every week, but you also want to develop young players. And I think Kevin has this period after, I think he calls it the hungry dog period. I might be wrong about that, but after practice where it might be 6 plays, might be 10 plays that they get plays in or extra work. And I think that's really important to develop young guys, because you know, we saw it with 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Not everybody, particularly a quarterback, makes it the first year or two. And this is a big jump going from college to NFL, whether you're a quarterback or not. So I think we're doing a good job there, but time will tell.
Anything else football-wise?
Jimmy, just kind of going back, you mentioned that 2 to 3 year window and kind of player development. Is there kind of an understanding that maybe this might take time for you guys to get back to?
Yeah, we talk about it openly. Now, could we take a big jump in 1 year? Yes, but we talk about we're not going to panic. We're going to draft good players. We're going to build through the draft. And next year we have 9 picks, including 2 ones. So that should help us. You know, I think you have to realize that we went 3 years with no ones, and I think at least one of those years we didn't have a 2, and maybe 2 of those years. And that hurts you roster-wise. I mean, it just does. And the players that are available in the first round, the chances of them being successful are way better than second's better than third, et cetera. So we're going to continue to stockpile those draft picks.
So that's interesting, right? Because when you go and you call the Deshaun Watson trade a swing and a miss, there are larger implications and more assumed understandings than just the team is out on Deshaun as the franchise quarterback. That part's obvious. We talked about that just a second ago. But the other part is the resources that you gave up for Deshaun Watson. When you accept that that was a swing and a miss, you're accepting that there was damage done to the team because we made this trade and the assets we gave up, which means no second-round picks for a while, no first-round picks for a while. And part of accepting that is accepting that the roster has been harmed because of that, which means the expectations will dip because of having to go at those problems going forward. This makes it clear to me that this season, regardless of how it goes, unless there is something that is uniquely embarrassing about it from Andrew Berry's standpoint or Kevin Stefanski's, more so embarrassing than just, oh, they had a bad record, these guys are safe because Jimmy sounds like he's bought into a new plan, that they're going to start rebuilding, and that the bulk of this rebuilding is going to be done in next year's draft, which means what happens this season is not going to really change his feeling on that larger plan overall. Now, if we get to the 2026 or 27 season and the guys that you have selected in the first round in 2025, in 2026, don't look promising, then shit starts to change. But if you think that realization is going to be done in the middle of this season because they don't have a great record, he's telling you clear as day, he doesn't expect to have a great record this season. Again, he's opening himself up to, hey, I would love to be surprised, but that's kind of where he's at. The expectations are not high. And I say this all the time. Your win-loss record as a coach does not get you fired as much as your expectations get you fired. There have been coaches that have gotten fired after 10-win seasons, after 11-win seasons. Not because that win-loss record was bad, but because expectations were not met. Yes, a bad win-loss record can get you fired, but it's usually paired with underwhelming expectations. When they survived the last year, where the expectations were up here and the record was down here, when they survived that, because ownership mainly took the blame for the Deshaun Watson situation, that told me that they're probably clear for this year. So that's where the hot seat stands for Kevin and Andrew Berry. And it brings me back to my point about the fact that they're clearly moving on for Deshaun. You don't speak about like your team like this when you think, oh, we're going to get Deshaun back and have a franchise quarterback. They're thinking about this as we need to rebuild this entire team and we need to find a new quarterback.
With that type of philosophy,
That
get your message across to them that this is a building process, because you know how loyal they are and how frustrated.
Well, listen, we're frustrated too, and we share the fans' pain, okay? And he says this all the time. We're stewards of this franchise, and we need to do a better job. And we want to win for a lot of different reasons. The main reason we want to win is for our fans. They really do. We have great fans.
With that type of philosophy of sort of a little bit of a patient attitude for this season, what does that mean for Kevin Stefanski? Because people are already asking me if he's on the hot seat this year.
Yeah, listen, I don't. You all, we talk to you all fairly frequently, and we're very supportive of Kevin and Andrew. Now, do they need to do better? Yeah, but so do D and I. You know what I mean? And these are high pressure jobs they have, but we really like them in their roles as coach and GM, and we really like them as people. And I say this all the time: they're 38 and 42 years old.
Again, more doubling down on what we already know here. He likes Kevin. He likes Andrew. He likes working with these guys. And, you can bring up the faults that Kevin or Andrew has, but he's saying, hey, look, they're 38 and 42, which if you're talking about head coach GM, extremely young. And when Jimmy says that, he's like, hey, I'm going to let these guys grow, right? And Jimmy talks about the mistakes he made when he was first the owner and the growth he was able to demonstrate, which there is evidence of. Me, I don't believe in ownership ever being the driving force of your success. I always think they're a factor that you have to plan around more than you do stuff because. But when he's saying that, he's saying, I'm giving these guys the leeway. I think that they're young versions of future great GMs and future head coaches, and I'm going to allow them to develop and allow them to go forward. I don't see them as finished products. And that's kind of how Jimmy views it, and why every time you hear about somebody saying Kevin's on the hot seat, the response back from people in the know is no, that's not true. Jimmy thinks of these guys very highly. You can agree or disagree with that, but that's where Jimmy is. So if we're talking about what's going to happen with the team going forward, you got to factor that in. And that's a huge part of this. All right, let's quickly try to touch on this stadium stuff. I'm not very interested in this subject anymore. It seems obvious that the stadium's going to be built. Really, the questions that surround this stadium are logistical, right? Jimmy mentioned in this press conference that they're going to be breaking ground for the stadium at the end of this year, that they expect a significant amount of construction to be done in the first quarter of the year, and that they expect this stadium construction to be done within the next 3.5 seasons. We'll see what happens with that, right? There was a question about where, and I've had this question, where are they getting the other $600 million that they need to finish this stadium? Is it going to come from the county? It doesn't seem like the county wants to do it. Is it going to come from the city? It definitely doesn't seem like the city wants to do it. So where are they going to get this money from? Jimmy answered that question. Let's roll that.
And that's how good teams work together.
All right, we'll take some stadium questions now.
So-
Jimmy and Dee, what can you tell us about the last $600 million you've said you needed for the dome? The county says it won't pay. Where will that money come from? Do you know yet?
Yeah, really good question, Ed. First of all, most appreciative of the state of Ohio, as we said earlier. What we said all along is we hope there was $600 million available locally. I think through Brook Park and the mechanisms we put in place, that's 300, so that leaves you 300 short. What I would say this big picture, and we never, I know it frustrates you all, we never want to front run the people. And so with the state of Ohio, we never talk publicly about how things might get financed. And by the way, our plan isn't what they used to come up with the $600 million. I don't want to do the same thing with the county. What I would say is now is the time to work together. Maybe it doesn't work out with the county, but now's the time to sit down and see if we can't work together. This is an important project. I don't think many other entities are spending $2 billion plus in this community.
And we are located in the county, so we will be working with the county.
Means that's the plan to get to $600 million, right? Basically pitting up private equity versus the county. And what Jimmy is proposing here, which is kind of a nasty trick that billionaires do to get shit built. and say, hey, look, I'm going to get this $600 million from somebody, and it's not going to come out of my pocket, right? Because when he's talking about we can get that $600 million, he's not talking about individually dropping $600 million himself. He's talking about getting that $600 million from private equity, right? And what that will mean for consumers is that they're going to want a sharper return on investment. There's going to be more kind of corporate overreach in that. So that means like higher prices for parking, higher prices for concessions. And Jimmy is saying, hey, we can save ourselves all of that. Save ourselves all. Again, keep in mind, he has $600 million. He could just drop if he wanted to. He doesn't have to go to private capital. But he's proposing it as a false choice to the county, saying, hey, that's the other option. Because I'm not going to drop $600 million on this. So I'll ask private capital to do it. Or the county could drop that 600, and that's going to keep parking prices at market rate. That's going to keep concession prices at market rate, or allow some flexibility like the Atlanta Falcons have on their concession prices in the stadium. That's going to allow this to be less run for direct profit. That's what that means, right? So basically, he's arguing with the county, and he's making it so that the county has to put up the $600 million if they want to avoid fans basically being price gouged at this place in Brook Park, right? Which is absolutely what would happen, in my opinion, if the Browns got this extra $600 million from private capital, which, if you know about the BlackRock and all that stuff, and the way that they kind of do stuff in industry, it's never good for the consumer. So that's kind of what Jimmy's doing right there. It's a standard dirty billionaire trick, false choice thing that they're doing there. Again, there's no good guys. There's no good guys in this story right now, right? And that's my thing with this new stadium, right? People who really want the dome, I understand you want the dome, but understand Jimmy's not building that dome out the goodness of his heart because he's such a benevolent person. He's building that dome to make money. And the less he takes on financially, the less risk he has to take on financially, the more market rate he can make the prices. And that's why he's trying to force the city and the county to work with him versus having to work with private interests. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? You can make your own determination on whether those trade-offs are worth the amount of funds the county would have to drop towards it. That's a whole nother debate in itself. But the stadium is happening. Jimmy Haslam said in his press conference, it's 99.9% happening. They've already scheduled a groundbreaking. They've already scheduled construction. They've been planning this stadium for 5 years. They're going to build it. That building is going up in Brook Park. That is what's happening, and they don't believe the Art Modell rule has any legal coverage over what the Browns are doing. And they feel confident about their ability to win that argument in court. So that stadium's being built. That's what the debate is about the extra money, in my opinion. But that's the Jimmy Haslam and D. Haslam press conference. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.